Speaker Silver, thank you very much for joining us today.
Always delighted to be with you.
So I'd like to start with education because we have upwards of 1,000 people here today. It's the Alliance for Quality Education, of course, and their main issue is restoring some of the cuts that the governor has proposed. Your House and the Senate are about to put their one-house budget bills forward. Will there be restoration in your budget of education cuts?
Well, what's interesting and what's not known is the fact that even the budget the governor submitted makes a significant increase in education aid for next year. And let's understand, there is not a significant cut in education aid this year from the state. The total statewide cut is only $200 million. The difficulty and the thing that people are understanding is there is significant cut of federal funding that came last year and the year before, so that school districts will be losing about $1.6 billion. But most of it, 1.4 of it, is the federal money that was given to school districts last year as part of the stimulus package, part of an enhanced Title I to those communities that have Title I students. So while this year state funds has a $200 million cut, it also is a 2-year appropriation, and next year there's an increase of $800 million over that.
So there's nothing that the legislature is going to be able to do in terms of increasing or making up that $200 million?
Oh, I believe the legislature will do something, but I think it's important for the public to understand that the cut is federal more than it is state. We were only the vehicle by which the federal dollars get passed through the school districts in last year's budget. So the reality is the state dollar cut is $200 million. That's it.
When you put the budget forward for your House, will there be some kind of change in the shares? Because I know that is something that the Senate, that upstate districts feel like they are getting disproportionately cut vis-a-vis the Long Island districts, which the Senate Republicans are, of course, very concerned about.
I think we'll put forth a fair proposal. Remember, there's a CFE decision that hangs over all of education funding that basically says we should be giving to the districts that don't have the wealthy people who can support their own school districts. We should be giving them more money. So in a sense, the governor has stuck to that in even making the cuts he made in a progressive fashion, although they hurt. Because remember, the school district that depends on the state for 85% of its funding, a 2% cut is more significant than the school district that depends on the state for 10% of its funding. A 2% equitable cut is much less in terms of total dollars on the whole school budget. So we will stick with the governor's progressivity because we think it's important. It's important to bring the whole state along as far as that goes. But we're also committed to an on-time budget in the Assembly. We want to do what's realistic in terms of the fiscal situation that we face as a state. We want to right the ship here and then go from there. Hopefully the economy will get better.
Okay, in terms of realistic, though, you have said that even though you don't believe that the Senate will go for it or the governor will go for it, you intend to put the millionaire's tax in some kind of capacity into the Assembly budget. I understand, since subsequently we've seen a letter signed by 70 now of your members who say that this is something they want to do. Of course, the labor unions are interested in seeing it too, but isn't it a little bit tilting at windmills to do it? I mean, even though they want to see it done, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to budge.
Well, in this economic climate, it would seem to me that we should be concerned about keeping teachers in classrooms, keeping healthcare professionals in hospitals, and providing clinic services. And we should not be focused on reducing tax burdens of people who make $1 million or more. I think even the people who make the $1 million or more believe that they should be paying more than their fair share. I know Warren Buffett has been on television saying that. that the percentage of the overall income that he makes is less than people, working men and women who make in the $50,000-$60,000 range. And it's certainly true in New York when you hit the top tax rate once you make $40,000 or $50,000.
Well, but the problem with the millionaire's tax is it's a little bit of a misnomer because it starts at $200,000 for individuals and then goes from there $300,000 for couples. When you talk about a millionaire's tax, people who make millions.
We may adjust that to conform to the soundbite.
Okay, so would that mean the floor would be raised to $500,000, or you would raise the floor all the way to $1 million?
All the way to $1 million, possibly.
And then, but wouldn't you then have to also adjust the percentage in order to get the revenue that you're expecting to get?
No, we'll get the revenue that brings.
Okay, so you would get less than the $4 to $5 billion that everyone.
That's correct, on an annual basis, correct. But not significantly less, I might tell you.
Right, because, the projections I've heard is 75 to 85% of what's already coming in is coming from
Correct.
people who indeed make $1 million.
That's correct.
That money then, in your mind, would be used to do what specifically?
I think we would dedicate a big portion of that for education funding.
And in this current fiscal year?
In this current fiscal year and in future fiscal years, we would hold a reserve fund to be able to meet the obligations, meet the foundation formula that we put in place last year to help most of the districts that have less.
Obviously, the other big portion of the budget is Medicaid. And
Correct.
We've seen this Medicaid redesign team now is being called into question. There's some ethics questions, but leaving that aside, in terms of the numbers, will your budget include all of what the MRT has proposed, including the med-mal piece, the medical malpractice piece, which I know a lot of your members are concerned about?
A lot of our members are concerned about it. I believe a lot of our members will not go along with it, including myself. I don't believe in it. I believe that the way to end or significantly reduce malpractice costs is to have a focus on reducing error and reducing infection in hospitals. That's clearly the way to do it, and there are hospitals that have done it. The Columbia University Hospital in New York is a perfect example of how they have reduced it, especially in the obstetrics area. And we believe that that's the approach to take, that people who are injured, people who will suffer for the rest of their lives, especially brain-injured children, as a result of errors made by doctors that are avoidable or by hospitals that are avoidable, should live as comfortably as they can under the inabilities that are given to them as a result of those errors, and somebody should provide the money to pay for it.
But if you don't include that in your budget proposal, and it sounds to me like when Assemblyman Gottfried called this piece DOA, he was not kidding. If this is something that the Assembly Democrats are not going to be able to support, including yourself, then the hospitals will come back and say, well, if you take this away from us, then we're not going to be able to hit that 4% cap that the governor wants us to hit in terms of spending cuts, and that sets the whole Medicaid reform proposal out of whack. So how do you make up the difference?
Well, I don't think it sends anything out of whack as far as that's concerned. I think at the table, if we don't do it, it'll be reconfigured to conform to what's passable. I mean, that commission was not created with everybody, one man, one vote, or one woman, one vote. The hospitals were at the table, the union was at the table, there were other segments of the industry at the table, but there were also other people who weren't at the table. And just to say that segment, I mean, there were no consumers. There were no patient advocates. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think they did a great job, the commission. I think they really did do a great job, and they gave us a framework by which to adopt a budget and to redirect our spending. However, the legislature did not abdicate their responsibility to that group, and the legislature as a whole, Senate and the Assembly, have an ability to look over what they did and make the necessary changes. That's what the people charge us with.
Well, the attorneys weren't there at the table either, and the Bar Association, of course, is furious about this. However, the Cuomo administration, anyone who dares to suggest that the medical malpractice piece of this is in some way out of whack, has been very harshly criticized, saying that they are in some way a mouthpiece for trial lawyers. I mean, how do you inoculate yourself
but the
against that?
pharmacists weren't at the table either.
Sure.
The drug providers weren't at the table, the manufacturers. So, I don't think anybody's saying everybody was at the table. So let's be very clear. It's not a matter of inoculating. There were no representatives of patients at the table. There were no good government groups at the table. Were there editorial boards at the table? I don't know if they should be at the table. But I'm saying even within the group. But that's not a criticism of it. That's just the legislature's responsibility is to take a proposal and adapt it to what they think is appropriate.
But don't you then put yourself on a bit of a collision course with the governor, who was quite clear, who said, I'm putting this in my 30-day budget amendments as is. I want you, legislature, to pass it as is. And now subsequently he's taken to the airwaves, he's robocalling people on his budget and saying, I want you to pass it. And also making it quite clear that if there's a standoff in terms of an on-time budget, which I think both you and the Senate want, then he's going to put it all into budget extenders and
I understand. I understand that fully. I also know that the governor understands that there are two houses of the legislature in addition to the governor, and all three sign off on a budget, and the compromise is the key word to doing things in the legislature. And the my way or the highway is what makes the government process dysfunctional. So people have concerns, people have a right to express those concerns, and people have a right to compromise their concerns in order to achieve the ultimate success.
Do you believe that the administration is open to that?
I would hope that the administration is open to that. I do believe they're open to that.
In terms of the budget proposal that you'll be putting out, and this is next week,
Correct.
will you include some of the other things that I think that the governor has made a priority? A property tax, for example, a property tax cap, rather. That is something that you would like to see done outside the confines of the budget?
I would hope to have it in the discussion of the budget.
You would?
I have indicated to the governor that there are issues that are related to that. Property tax cap gives people the right to live in their homes and keep it affordable. In some of the downstate regions and suburban communities of the city of New York, rent regulation is similar. If you're a tenant, how much rent you pay, and maintaining that regulation gives people a sense of affordability as to how much they're going to be paying going forward. I support both. I support giving people security in their homes, giving people the understanding of how much they will be forced to pay.
But the linking of those two issues, which was something that actually you and I discussed, and I think it's well over a month and a half ago, just at the beginning of this session, was something that the governor put the kibosh on very quickly, suggesting there should be no linkage. Of course, budgets are about negotiations, and linkage is part of negotiation, but are you suggesting that these two issues should be linked?
I would say philosophically they do the same thing. They don't distinguish. That way you don't distinguish whether somebody owns a house or somebody rents their place of abode. The overall philosophy is the same. Give people affordability in their homes. And that's, on that concept, they're linked. If we want to do it as, the budget technically shouldn't be linked to real property tax cap. But if the governor wants to link it to real property tax cap, then I certainly think it's appropriate to link the budget likewise to the rent regulation piece.
Just before I wrap up here, one sort of non-budget topic. Another thing that's happening at the Capitol today is this strategy meeting that the governor is holding with advocates who are interested in legalizing same-sex marriage. This is something that your house has passed 3 times already. This issue is really in the Senate. I'm just curious when and if you might be putting this back up for a vote in your house, or will you wait until...
Well, I think what's important is clearly everybody knows where the Democratic Conference and the Assembly stands. They take it as a given, even though some people were defeated, and that was one of the issues on which they were defeated upon in certain parts of the state, having voted for that issue. And, I think it's fine that they develop a strategy that see how they can do it in the Senate. I would just say, at this point, that we will sit and see how that strategy unfolds.
You do believe that it would pass your House, despite the fact that the Republicans have made gains, and that you now don't have the veto-proof majority anymore in your conference.
Well, the veto-proof majority is really not an issue. We have never overridden the governor's veto with just Democratic votes. Let's be clear.
And gay marriage has passed with Republican votes.
And the governor was prepared to sign it as well. So that's not an issue. But some of the Republicans who voted for it aren't here.
True. But you're not, at this point, planning to put it back onto the floor for your House until you see what happens with the Senate and how the strategy with the governor and the advocates unfolds?
Well, let's put it this way. Right now we're focused on an on-time budget. Beyond the budget era, we will set a schedule of substantive bills that we will put out. But predominantly the budget is going to dominate the debate for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. I want to thank you very much for all your time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
It's good to
Pleasure
see you.
being with you.